Welcome, 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 welcome. Part of our continuing series where we talk to people from many different backgrounds on the topic of political polarization. We don't care if they're on the left, they're on the right. We talk to academics and professors and philosophers and activists. And today we have a politician, somebody who actually ran in political races and did fairly well, coming from almost a background as not known in those races. She made a showing in 2 different states, almost unheard of for any political candidate to run in 2 vastly different states and make any sort of showing at all, let alone run in 2 different states, almost unheard of. Jacqueline McGowan ran in the recall election in California as a Democrat, not as a Republican, just so everybody knows. And then she moved to Illinois and she ran for a congressional race there. And then she moved to Florida and happened to live right next door, basically, to Trump land. And as a liberal or California progressive, whatever you want to call it, she saw races in the leftist West Coast, the conservative heartland, and Trump land. And she'll be able to talk about what she saw, both as an American with 2 working eyeballs, as we say, but also as somebody who understands politics and has been lamenting the direction of the country. I remember, Jackie, you were the first one to put me onto the idea that we might be dealing with, and I've heard other people bring this up since you raised it to my attention, that we might be dealing with a mass bailout of voters, where voters are just so fatigued and tired, they don't want to participate anymore. And that might be a real problem in the future with democracy. Am I getting that right?
Absolutely. You nailed it.
And you did have experience with the California election and the Illinois election and the Florida election. So let me ask you right off the bat. You've seen all these things. Now, when I'm studying political polarization, I've been reading a lot of books by different authors, but the academics who are studying polarization have a huge debate amongst themselves. And roughly it goes like this. Oh, it's just the elites in Congress who are polarized. The people themselves in America aren't really polarized. We have polls showing that a majority of Americans agree on issues like abortion and gun control, etc. So we can assume that political polarization doesn't exist at the community level, is only found by the elites in Congress. Is that what you saw on the ground in California and Illinois and in Florida?
I mean, I like to say that we all live and work in the same communities and get along, whether we're a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent. We do. But that's because we're not talking about the most triggering issues for us. Yes, I do believe that we have some of the same beliefs, both Republicans and Democrats, when it comes to abortion. I'm pretty sure we could come up with a national way to come together in the middle with some sort of ban, whether it be like 6 weeks, 8 weeks, I don't know, 12 weeks. I'm not a doctor, but I know that there are plenty of Republicans getting abortions. So it's completely false to say that they don't, right? Um, and gun control, I'm pretty sure we could come up with mandatory background checks and things like that. But when it comes to talking about Trump and what he's going through, this is where we start to lose the ability to communicate. And therefore, we can't talk about the other issues because we can't talk about the most triggering one right now, which is, that Trump has been indicted for a second time and since has been arraigned and is, more than likely going to trial with a pretty serious, criminal accusation. But then when this issue comes up, it's but Joe Biden and then whatever else, but Hillary and all of that stuff all over again. And so, yeah, I think we're heading into an era where we're going to be so completely politicized and polarized that we're not going to talk about it anymore and we're not going to vote. That's my fear.
I want to, with your permission, I'm not trying to do this for blood sport, but we've known each other for a while, since the recall election when I covered you in one of the debates. That was great. And I've known you and some of the personal struggles that you went through. I want to very gently and respectfully bring up some of those struggles and ask you about it, because I think they provide an answer. I feel that in the academic space, it's okay to say we have a lot of studies showing that politicians, the two parties are very separate from each other and they're very ideologically cohesive and they almost have no interactions with each other. But this idea that polarization doesn't extend down to the people level, your life experience to me just defies that whole concept. You lost family members running as a Democrat in California, where, I mean, you lost family members straight up. And then which is pretty extreme. Hey, I'm running as a Democrat. Okay, we're not family anymore. And then you also went to Illinois, and it was also really extreme and polarized. And then you went to Florida, and I remember you got a job, and you could talk to conservatives, but it was kind of the same lessons that you had in California. You had to apply in Florida and a little bit in Illinois, which is that you just can't talk about certain things if you want to keep it polite and be able to keep these people as friends. Am I getting this right? Is that roughly what happened?
Yeah, so I started out as a cannabis lobbyist in California, and when we all showed up to lobby together at the local and state level, we had the same goal of getting a bill passed or shooting down a bill. We were never wearing a big D on our face or a big R on our face. And so for almost a decade of lobbying in cannabis, I didn't know which one of my friends were necessarily Republicans or Democrats, but I sure found out as soon as I submitted my application to run in the recall race as a Democrat. And the divide began, and I had no idea that so many, of my friends were that hardcore conservatives, and yet some of them we were able to have conversations, and they still donated to my campaign. But I did lose a lot of friends and family by coming out like with that label on me.
And you didn't come out and say, I'm an anti-Trump Democrat. I hate Trump. He's everything horrible. Your campaign was just, I'm a Democrat. And just saying that alone was enough to start severing relationships that you had for a while. Is that correct?
That's right.
And tell me about trying to get along with conservatives in Florida. Another thing that a lot of academics and people in the political polarization sphere say is, we can get past polarization. We just got to have quality conversations with each other and see each other as the other person. I remember you being in California, and I was hosting the recall debates where we had basically every candidate who ran, almost all of them, most of them. And we had Democrats and Republicans in there. And you were the only person during that entire race that was talking about how you could walk up to Republicans and have a conversation and they might help you with your paperwork. And then you went to Florida and you found yourself as a California progressive, basically in Trump land, dealing with a lot of Trump supporters all the time. And what I felt was that you kept saying, it's cool up until a point, and then you can't talk about certain subjects. You can't have certain things. You want to avoid going to that third rail, and that was key in order to keep things nice and have pleasant interactions. Am I getting that wrong, or is that roughly correct?
Completely right. Yeah.
Okay. Then the question for me is, let's say I'm a hardcore conservative, you're a hardcore liberal. How are we supposed to have a quality communication if we can't talk about the issues that are actually dividing America?
Because everyone just gets so overwhelmed. There's so many issues. There's so many different news sources, and where people are getting it, where they're consuming their news makes a difference in what they're saying. And I'm not necessarily up to speed on Newsmax and Fox News.
Yeah. Right.
So that there are times I can't go to a certain point, and I, myself am overwhelmed trying to figure out what the truth is on so many issues. It's a constant daily struggle.
But if we're experiencing, well, first, do you think there's a level of increased political polarization in America? You've been around a little bit. Is it bad in the last 5 years? Or, nah, it's not that bad, and the news is overblowing this?
Oh, it's pretty bad.
Oh,
It's
really? I mean, how
pretty,
bad is it? I mean, didn't we have the 1990s and, the Republicans were mad at Clinton and Lewinsky, and people got a little bit upset when George Bush invaded Iraq? Is this more polarized than those periods?
it feels like it.
And what I want everybody in the audience to recognize is that this is somebody who's ran for office and ran for office and ran for office and was a lobbyist in Sacramento for a decade. Knows the ins and outs of politics, is not just an average voter. I had her on because she's ran for office in multiple states, met the other office holders, met the people you see on TV, was a lobbyist in Sacramento, actually had somewhat of a tit for tat relationship with Newsom, and is able to say, I know what the political climate in 3 different locations across America was roughly when things were super polarized. And yes, I lost friends. Yes, I lost family. Yes, I couldn't have reasonable conversations about the issues that mattered across the board with conservatives in California and in Illinois and in Florida.
I
And when I
couldn't have
hear,
it with my own family.
I, can you see my frustration where people are saying, if there is a political divide, we can fix it by having people come together? You're a liberal from California and Florida. That's the most coming together I can think of.
Right.
California liberal hanging out right in the neighborhood with a bunch of Trump-loving Floridians. And you did excellent at working with Republicans. You were the most excellent at working with Republicans, Democrat, in the race, in the recall race. And I think it was because you had so many years as a cannabis lobbyist working for them where it wasn't about politics. I remember Doug, I forget his name, very, very nice. Yes,
Yeah.
very nice gentleman, very conservative. Kind of a mountain California Republican, and you got along with him great. He helped out, so you were very good at getting along with conservatives, more than most liberals I saw in California. And I was in a position to say that because I did the debates. But it was still, well, you can't talk about that with them, and you can't talk about this, and you focus on this, and you don't talk about that. How are we supposed to have the hard, awkward conversations that will bring about healing as a nation if there's certain topics that we can't talk about if we're on 2 different political sides?
I wish I knew the answer.
That's why you're here. What?
I'm not here because
Let me call my producer. You told me this woman knew what she was talking about. Okay, fine. Sorry, my mistake. That was a joke. Why? Why? What's going on? I mean, really, Jackie, it blows me away. You were able to get Republicans to go, look, I don't agree with your policies, but I'll help you, file your paperwork or do this and that. And it was because you had a very warming, charming personality, and you were able to be, I may not agree with you, but I don't hate you as a person. I saw the way you talked with Doug. You would vehemently fight tooth and nail in a debate for your policies over his policies. But behind the debate scene, you were very cordial and respectful with him. You never said, hey, I agree with everything you say. It was about respect. And we just don't see that anymore. And so I see you as one of the people who could be most likely to bridge this divide. And it bothers me deeply to hear the way that you do that is just by avoiding a lot of those difficult conversations. How then are we supposed to move forward as a nation?
I think it starts by finding common ground, but common ground just gets misconstrued, and we get misinformed by the media for clicks and for advertising money.
Why do you think academics might say that polarization doesn't exist amongst the people and only exists amongst the elites in Congress? I understand you're not in the field. I understand you're not a Princeton researcher, but just off the top of your head, you're experiencing something that says that's not true. How do we get an entire field of people come to the opposite conclusion?
It's just going to have to get worse before it gets better. And it's going to get worse.
Academics are maybe so isolated from everyday life they can't see it. It needs to ramp up 2 or 3 notches before it's super boiling, and then they'll pay attention.
Well, I don't know that the academics are even going to be able to come up with a solution.
Why not?
Because it's almost like a house that's infested with termites,
What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean?
It
What do you mean? And please explain in a way for somebody who's not initiated in politics. You and I are very initiated in politics, but the show's for the average person, that 15-year-old who's trying to learn. What do you mean? And please explain it to like you're telling a 15-year-old who doesn't fully understand politics. Please.
I'm not even sure how to break that down. It's like um every time we pass a law, trying to implement the law is a whole nother ball game, right? And often the language that was used in a bill that's been passed um, doesn't necessarily get implemented in the way that it was intended, and government rarely matches its intentions with policy because it's like a congested freeway, and there's just more and more laws kind of converging in together, you know. And the more laws that we pass, the worse it gets, and the harder it becomes to undo that freeway is just going to stay congested. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so then when you have an issue, I used to say all the time when it came to cannabis politics, every time we did get something passed and we fixed one problem, we created three more.
I
Unintentionally.
understand that.
We didn't even see it coming. Didn't see how, you know, in one county we passed just getting a water board permit as a way to start the process of becoming legal, and it caused it fixed the problem. We got like a bunch of people through the gates, and it caused a massive um, buying surge in this area for land that it displaced farmers. I mean, so none of us saw any of that happening, you know, and that's how government works. And so then they'll go past another law, and again it breaks one thing, and or it fixes one thing and breaks three other things, and then you're running around trying to fix those other broken things. It's crazy, it's convoluted, and it makes it really difficult to get anything done. And the more and more laws that we pass, the more stakeholders you have at the table arguing for their own interests and how it might affect them. And so government just becomes so incredibly difficult to actually get anything done that it becomes easier for the media to make a circus out of it and get clicks out of it than to, you know, show any kind of progress, because progress is far and few between.
Hmm.
That makes sense?
Less progress to show, hey, we need to sell soap, as my mom would say, so let's have some more sensationalism on TV and at least make some dollars at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Some people have kind of a romantic view of politics, that it was, all perfect before Trump got here. I remember a story you told me about when you were working in cannabis lobbying in Sacramento during that decade, and you had lobbied and lobbied and lobbied, and other people who were working with you, and there was a big team effort, and a lot of people were on board, and you had this legislation ready to go, and then they tanked the legislation because one of the politicians had said something mean about the other person the night before, or insulted them or did something, and they're like, no, I'm not going to pass this legislation that everybody wants, just to stick it to the other person.
Yes. And our bill died that day, and it was for veterans access to medical cannabis and not having to pay taxes on it. That's it. And we saw nothing but blue skies, and the industry was aligned, and 50 people showed up to speak, and veterans and wheelchairs and crutches and things, and it was everybody was on the same team that day. And instead of our bill passing that committee like we anticipated, it got shot down. And when I turned to my coworker and asked him what in the world just happened, and he said, oh, so and so and so and so got in a fight in a previous committee and retaliated against each other on our bill. And I was like, oh my God, that's the way this works.
Were those both Democrats or people of the same party or different parties?
I don't know if it were, I know at least one of them was a Democrat. I don't know what the other one was.
So even when things were good, we still had people who would tank legislation because they couldn't get along.
Yeah. Had
Okay.
another one tank a bill once and sent a message to all of us that we didn't raise enough money at the fundraiser that we held for him in a nonchalant way. That's what he said, you know.
Well, tact is an art that is not well practiced. Uh, let me ask you. So I'm not asking your opinion for this. A lot of people don't like her. I'm not asking you to endorse her. I'm simply bringing up her name so I can make a point. Marjorie Taylor Greene, on President's Day, issued a tweet and said, red and blue can't live together anymore. We need a national divorce. In response, 30 different media publications came forward and said, oh, Marjorie, you idiot, there's no political division at all. Does that sound accurate to you?
That's very funny.
Okay. Even Stephen Colbert went on the Tonight Show and acted like Marjorie was crazy and nobody knew what she was talking about. The Young Turks did it. I think Anna Kasparian and Crystal Ball from Breaking Points all did it. Like, you're an idiot. We have no idea what you're talking about. So direct contradiction, those statements from your lived experience roughly around the same time. I found that interesting. The other thing that I found interesting was that after they said that, the media said, oh, Marjorie, we don't need a national divorce. We need marriage counseling. There was a Utah governor who said that. If America's much more polarized significantly than it is now, as you say, and if it looks like it's going to get worse, at least in the foreseeable future, as you say, and if it's already bad enough where you can lose family members and friends, as you say, what does marriage counseling for a population of 200 to 300 million, as polarized as we are, look like?
That's a great question. I don't have the answer.
Who does marriage counseling? I mean, who could be the marriage counselor?
I don't know.
Typically, I understood it was the president that would be the spokesperson, the soul of the nation. That didn't work. We have half the country who doesn't like him, whether they should or not.
Right.
So how do we get, if it's not going to be the president that's going to bring us together, which was traditionally the role that was closest to that job duty for the last 200 years, who's going to do it and how does it get done?
Where's Jerry Falwell when you need him?
Oh my God. Wow. We're bringing out all the greats. If we're doing that, I'm going to say, let's bring back Moses. Cause I mean, we're bringing back the dead. I'm going to go all the way. Let's go all the way, get Moses back and say, we're not your people. Can you lead us to the promised land? I'm not sure where that is. How much worse does this get? And does it get worse progressively each year, or is it kind of a slow burn, or do you think maybe things might pop off in the next 2 years, or is this kind of like a slow smolder that lasts a decade or two?
I don't think it gets any better until Trump is no longer the focus of anything.
Okay.
And I don't know when that will ever be.
Let's say, here, you can see me. I know you're not on camera, but let's say this is a magic wand. I'm giving you the magic wand, okay? Let's pretend you took the magic wand. In this magic wand, you have the ability, like Thanos in the Marvel comics, you can make reality anything you want. You poof, wave your magic wand. Donald Trump disappears, goes away, just separate universe. No one, he's not here. He can't run for office ever again. He's gone. And some embarrassing things come out on him that his followers never believed. And it comes out to be true. And he's embarrassed and he's disappeared and he can never return and he's totally gone. Gone, never can come back. How do we know that his ideology dies with him too?
We don't. We will only be left to wait and see what happens to the Republican Party after that. Do they devour their own, or do they move on and unite under someone else and fix, What I think is broken within the Republican Party is that it's been hijacked by evangelicals, and until they exterminate that, and I don't know that they ever will, I don't see them coming together as a party.
So the Republican Party has to get rid of evangelicals to actually be fixed.
Yeah.
That means losing most of their Midwest and Southern vote.
Yeah.
So they'd have to be willing to lose gigantic swaths of America in order to right themselves.
They won't.
Okay. I mean, that's the question, because I hear a lot of people, and some of the academics have said, all the political polarization, or 95% of it, is all the Republicans' faults. The Democrats have done very little. But then there's other people saying, okay, well, even if that were true, how do you know you get an idea out of someone's head? There was a study I was reading on political polarization, and it went roughly like this. If you send a person to war, they may come back physically alive, but they may have gone through so many experiences that they're changed. We have a lot of veterans here in the Valley. A lot of these people return, and they are not the same person for the rest of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
We saw it in Vietnam. There's Vietnam vets here. Remember growing up with that, going, hey, Dad, why is that guy staring at the wall?
Mm-hmm.
And, and he looked normal. And then you just, these bizarre behaviors from otherwise decent humans. You're going, oh, his brain was fried and numb. The phrase was, not all of them came back. It was kind of a sad joke, because it was a joke on, all of me came back, like I didn't lose an arm and a leg. And then they started to realize that, well, mental illness was also a form of loss too. And so you didn't actually come back. You didn't come back with your sanity and your personality. I've heard that story a million times. Saw that personally. There was a couple Iraq vets in my apartment complex. Exact same thing. I remember my dad going to the VA and saying, well, the new batch is in. And I go, what do you mean? He goes, new batch of guys with 1,000-year-olds there. I remember the last batch from Vietnam. We got a couple thousand dudes. They have the exact same look in their eyes as the guys coming out of Nam. They're gone. So we know that certain experiences can traumatize humans to the point that they don't ever snap out of it.
Mm-hmm.
How do we know that this hasn't happened to America?
It's a good question.
I was shocked to hell to see January 6th on TV. I remember my mother coming and yelling at me because I said I was going to throw the trash. I was visiting my parents. I do yard work. I like doing yard work, Mexican labor, etc. What am I? Majado trabajando was my abuela. But so my mom's coming in and she's like, I told you to throw the trash. And I'm like, look, Mom, there's a rebellion on TV. And she goes, I don't care what political show you're watching. I said, move the trash. And I go, no, damn it. Look at the TV. And I have talked to my mother maybe 3 times like that in my life. And I apologized immediately after. But folks, there were people storming the Capitol, and she damn near dropped the trash out of her hand and just stood there for a minute. We had never seen anything like that, ever. I'm 46. She's approaching 70. Neither one of us had ever seen anything like that. It was shocking, terrifying, dramatic. I remember that I had 2 different liberal friends, and I brought this up on the show, and a lot of people find it shocking. I had 2 different liberal friends who don't talk with each other who said the same thing to me on January 6th. Why didn't they round up 300 of those Republicans and shoot them dead live on TV? 2 different people who don't know that, typically don't talk that way, said, let's kill 300 Americans on television. It'll be a good call. So I view that as also a traumatic response to a traumatic event. How do we know that people weren't so traumatized by January 6th and then by the Republican Party walking back their condemnation of it? To me, I find that worse than January 6th. January 6th is horrible. But if you murder someone and then everybody goes, well, you shouldn't have murdered him. And you're like, yeah, I shouldn't have murdered him. But then a year later, you're like, actually murdering him was great. I think you're even more crazy.
Yeah.
At least I thought maybe you understood you did something wrong. You don't even think it's wrong. That's worse than doing it and going, whoa, I got ahead of myself. I shouldn't have done that. I was caught in emotion. No, bro. Good move. We did the right thing thinking about it over. What? That's madness. People, 78 million people doing that, I don't know if they can come back. And then other people watching those people think that way about an event that traumatized them. I don't know if they can come back. Do you see the idea that there might be a level of trauma that this country never walks back from?
Hmm.
Is that a possibility?
I'm not a psychiatrist. I
Okay.
can't level, how do you measure how many people suffer trauma from that or still suffer trauma from that? I have no clue.
Was there a traumatic political event that you remember that was as traumatic as January 6th that you'd witnessed in the previous 3 decades?
Live on TV, 9/11.
Political event.
Oh, no,
Okay. Was there as traumatic a politician as Donald Trump that you had witnessed the previous 3 decades?
never.
Okay, so we have a certain level of trauma with the person for 4 years, unseen in 3 decades, and a certain level of trauma with an event that's as dramatic as a terrorist attack on our soil, which was the most dramatic event this country had seen since World War II and Pearl Harbor. And it wasn't enough to really bring people together. I remember 9/11. A lot of academics have said, well, we need a big threat to bring us all together, and what they call a superordinate threat, like aliens
I was
invade.
gonna say aliens.
Yes, that's where they go. Yes, exactly. Aliens invade, all humans come together. We're all humans. We got to work together. That's what they're talking about. And there's some academics who say, well, if we could get people to have these conversations, which we went through, it doesn't look like it can happen. Well, then maybe there'd be a superordinate threat that'd bring us all together. And I go, like 9/11? Oh, yeah, like 9/11. We trashed that joint nationalism within a year and a half after 9/11. Right? We'd already split into camps on do we invade Iraq or not, or what's the way to deal with terrorism within about a year and a half. I remember that there was newspapers talking about how we had everybody together on the same page and the world united behind us, and then W. Bush destroyed it with his policies on invading Iraq and how he's going to pursue the war on terror. And it was very split. And then I go, okay, well, maybe not that superordinate threat. What about climate change, right? That's a threat that could get all of us. What about kids being shot down in school? That's a threat that should affect all of us. And yet we have no unity on either of those.
Yeah, right.
So there's multiple superordinate threats where we don't seem to come together at all, or not for very long. Why should we believe that one in the future would work when others in the past have not? This is the part where you have a fantastic answer that's going to fix America.
I wish I did.
What? Get my producer on the phone. You told me. I told you when it. Okay, fine. He's not picking up. This was going to be the answer show. I've been doing nothing but depressing problem shows. We were going to fix it all here today. How much worse do you think it can get, and how soon?
I mean, if you're really looking at this from a standpoint of trauma, okay, who was traumatized? The right was traumatized because a bunch of their buddies went to prison, and the left is traumatized because they feel that Trump is never held accountable. So accountability happens, it triggers the right. No accountability happens, it triggers the left. So I don't know what the solution is, but that's the pathway forward. Either he's going to jail or he's not. And we aren't talking about him any longer.
And if Trump doesn't go to jail and he never sees justice, and maybe they try him one or two more times, but even that doesn't stick, does that leave a lasting vestige of trauma in liberals?
Probably.
Like, we never able to actually get him. He's like the Teflon Don, right until before they got him.
Yep. And
just can't take him down.
So bitter that they don't vote.
What about conservatives who say the president's being picked on and that's not fair? And they see him being picked on, and that encourages them to not believe in democracy.
I think when you're used to a life of impunity, that any form of consequence feels like persecution.
Well stated. Wow. Well stated.
And I think that's a lot of what his supporters identify with, their lack of facing consequences, their own impunity is being, threatened.
There's some academics who say polarization is mostly on the right, barely on the left. And that we're mostly here because of the Republican Party. Is that true?
I think there's polarization so much on both sides that you see the most polarizing Congress people coming together on certain bills like AOC and Matt Gaetz.
Right. Right. You
So
pointed that out. What was the bill they came together on?
to try and stop and people in office from trading the stock market.
Right. Right. Insider trading, which is legal for Congress members. It's considered corruption in other countries except for here. That's just the way it's been. Yeah, you try. My favorite story is try explaining to a young person how the legal donation process in American politics works, and then try to explain to them how that's different from corruption. They don't understand the difference at all. I barely do either. So it's illustrative to see that. Okay. What about conservatives who say, hey, liberals are mean to us too? Liberals sometimes break the laws. Liberals sometimes do these bad things and they never get called out. And so far, I, as a conservative, feel the system isn't fair. And so I don't want to vote. Do they have any reason to think that?
I think there's injustice on both sides. I think both sides are absolutely corrupt. I pointed out a situation where a Democrat shot down one of the bills that he was supposed to support for us.
Right.
So is it equal? Right now, it sure feels like it's more on the right.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Let's say you have an argument with someone, and you've known them for a while, and you're in an argument, and you want to rebuild the relationship with them. Is it, from your personal experience in life, is it more likely to work if you walk up to them and go, hey, I made some mistakes too, and you did too, and I'm willing to come forward and admit my mistakes. So maybe you can too, and we can both, admit we made some errors, and maybe as that way we could kind of see as a way of coming together. Or is your experience as a human being that when you walk up to somebody and go, look, I did nothing wrong ever, and you guys in your side are the only ones screwing up the entire time. So really it's all you guys that need to fix yourself. Which one have you seen be more productive in human interactions?
I'm very positive the first scenario.
Okay.
That is the way that politics works.
So it might not be productive for us to say it's all you guys and we didn't really do anything. Maybe not. Maybe because nobody actually does that in their own personal life and gets anywhere with it. Perhaps that strategy writ large will not be as successful. I'm kind of running out of questions here. Was there anything you wanted to ask us? Was there any questions you had here or anything you wanted to cover? Was there something you weren't able to explain and you wanted to go in depth on?
No, I thought that went well.
Okay. I really just wanted to have you on as someone on the front. We have a lot of academics. Some of them are in the field, some are not, but you were in the field during the pivotal time.
Yeah.
In 3 different locations where it got intense. And I would hear people say, well, the public's not polarized. And I go, the lived experience of Jackie McGowan defies everything you're saying.
Totally.
So I wanted to have you on and just go, tell me what you saw, because it goes against this idea that the people themselves aren't that polarized. You were in 3 different locations, spread vastly apart in America, roughly around the same type of polarization and polarizing period, and you saw the same thing in all 3 environments, although they were different. And I thought that sounds like the people themselves are. I know it's not a scientific survey, but I found it to be a good data point. It seemed to show the people themselves are polarized. It's not just the elites. Maybe it started with the elites. Maybe it's encouraged by the elites. Maybe it could be toned down, like you said, by elites coming together and saying, hey, I'm an AOC and I can work with the Republican named Matt Gaetz. But the people are doing this now. The people have taken on the animus on their own. The people are taking actions of their own proclivities.
Right.
That's what I wanted to get out. So it was a great data point, and I really appreciate you coming out for that.
Thanks so much for having me, Marcus. This is great.
One last question before you go.
Okay.
Well, do you have any recommendations? Do you know anybody who maybe traveled America or worked in politics and saw some of the polarization up front that might be interested in having an honest conversation? Don't have to, but we always ask.
I'll think about it.
Okay. All right. That's all we ask. That's all we ask. We always ask for recommendations. The last one is this. You're not you. You're not Jackie McGowan. You're not me. You're not Marcus Ruiz Evans. You're a third person who's watched this interview. And they said, wow, there was a lot of good material there, a lot of confirmation of things I wasn't sure about. And it's a week later, and they're trying to remember everything you said. And they go, wow, there was this woman who ran as a politician. And boy, she had a lot of experience and a lot of insight. I don't remember everything she said, but there was this one thing that she said at the end of the interview, and I can't get that out of my head, and it's 5 days later. What is that one thought you want a random person you can't imagine, you've never met, to not be able to get out of their head 5 days from now?
Don't stop watching the news. Watch more news sources. When you get overwhelmed, dig for more info. We're all struggling to find the truth, and I think it's only coming really through by consuming as much as you can, seeing what everyone is saying, and finding some alternative media sources that you trust.
Okay, that was a good answer, but not cool, because most people are stumped when I ask that question. It takes a minute to think. You had your answer already ready, so
no, I just came up with that.
Really? That
Yeah.
Sounded planned.
Really? No.
Yeah, that sounded rehearsed. Like you like, okay, and here, I knew this question was coming. My answer is
no idea.
Oh. Okay, you just thought of it on your own, off the scratch. Right.
Because that's what I do every day.
Right. Because that's what I do. I'm such a great politician. I immediately think of the exact right emotional atonement to come up with off the top of my head with no warning. Okay. You're very humble too. I just want to put that out there.
Assume as much as possible, trying to get to what the truth is every day. And I want to have conversations with more people that.
Should people give up? It's tough. How about not voting? Like you said, it's tiring. It's exhausting. Is it okay to just give up and lay down?
We cannot.
What do you mean? Why is that not okay?
We can't get too tired to stop voting. We can't.
Why not? What happens if we do?
We'll never be able to change anything if we don't vote.
Yeah. I remember there was this group called the Sunnis of Iraq, and they decided to not vote in the new government. And it was 10 years of explosions and a very horrible quality of life for them until they had the Anbar awakening, where they decided maybe we should vote, even if we don't like the government, because otherwise we get nothing. So doesn't normally work out well for the people who don't vote, but it also doesn't work out well for the society that has a lot of people in it that don't vote. Societies with low voting participation are typically more unstable.
There you go.
Kind of weird, huh? You get like less than 30% of the population bothers to even care about who's in charge of the government. You're more likely to have revolutions because they have no attachment to the government because they don't think it's theirs. Why not overthrow it? I had nothing to do with it. I'm not in charge. I never picked them. You have to have people feel, right or wrong, that they have ownership of the people in charge, whether they do or not. And when you lose that, you lose that common bond that people have that even allows them to operate as a country. So, okay, we'll leave it there. Thank you for being here. Thank you for coming out. Thank you for being honest. I know some of these topics are a little bit difficult. I really appreciate you coming out. I know this is a sensitive subject, but your life is an important data point that helps us find out what direction this debate should go in. So I appreciate it deeply. Jackie? Okay, might have lost her there for a second. Want to say thank you to candidate McGowan. We hope that she runs again. She did a great interview, and we'll talk to her soon. Thank you, everybody.